Good evening and welcome everyone to the Power of Passive Investing. We are thrilled with our guest tonight, Brian Shafer. He is absolutely amazing. Unfortunately, my co-host Matt is stuck in traffic as he's working in New York and he has to travel to his job sometimes. So maybe he'll be able to join us later. But in the meantime, let me guys tell you a little bit about Brian. Brian is an avid real estate investor who ventured into real estate about 5 years ago. If you get to know Brian better on a more personal level, you'll know that he is super persistent when it comes to his goals. Earlier in his career, his persistence led him to start a sports nutrition store completely from scratch. Another example is he visited 21 banks over 2 years, getting turned down for funding. And when he got to the 21st one, that was the bank that essentially gave him the financing. So his persistence did pay off. Brian is fortunate to have 2 kids, and his goal is to pass his passion and his persistence skill to his kids. He currently resides in Wapala, Iowa with his fiance and 2 sons. He has a passion for sprint car racing and wrestling, and he will never turn down a good glass of scotch. So keep that in mind for those that will get to know Brian better. The topic for tonight is actually from raw land to flex space Goldmine. We've never had anyone talk about new development, especially development when it comes to starting from scratch and going into flex space. And I'm really excited about this topic because as some of you may probably know, that I've also entered the world of commercial real estate beyond just multifamily, and have been on a lookout and making offers on the commercial properties such as flex spaces, retail and shopping plazas, medical offices, and stuff like that. So if any of you hear of a potential good project in Southeast, please do reach out and let me know. I'm always interested to see good projects. But without any further ado, I want to introduce to you Brian, and I also want to let you know, guys, that we're doing today's webinar slightly differently. Even though it's still in the educational format and everything, we're gonna do a question and answer format. Seems like one of the past webinars when we interviewed Richard Fowler, our audience seemed to like that Q&A format, so we're trying that again today. First, Brian, welcome to the Power of Passive Investing. We're thrilled to have you here with us.
Thank you, Elena. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. And would like to start by asking you to give us your brief bio and to talk, how did you get into the real estate about 5 years ago?
Yeah, great question. So I started growing up, my dad kind of just was always working with hand tools. He was very crafty. He did upholstery for a living, so a lot of restoration of cars, but he kind of just had my brother and I always building things, probably things that today parents would maybe get in some trouble for with some of the tools that we use at such a young age, but he had us building sawhorses. If we wanted a toolbox or something, instead of going out and buying a plastic toolbox, we would build our own toolboxes. And I believe my brother might even still have his. But so we grew up building things with our hands and just kind of always had that basic knowledge of how to put things together and have that craftsmanship mindset. My brother took off in construction, I think, in around the late 90s. And around 2000, I started working with him part-time to start with, doing basic remodels first. And then, as we moved forward, we started doing some home building. And I really found myself loving to do, just being able to see a bare piece of land and then have a finished product. And you're driving around town and you see these houses that you still built years ago, and you can actually remember little things of that exact day that were going on. So being able to see something from the ground up really, I guess, resonated with me over the years. And it actually took me a few years to realize how much that meant to me, until you're maybe taking your kids by and saying, hey, we built this house, we built this house. And um, it just hit me one day that, I think if there's anything that I'm going to do and be good at, it's going to have to do with construction. So I was actually working another job, and I was doing swing shift, and I was kind of at a point, crossroads, I guess, if you will, where I knew I had a decision to make, and it was either stay with this company and continue to work towards that 401k and retiring, or taking a leap of faith and finding something different. So at that point, I had never listened to a podcast in my life. And I decided, on this drive home from a long hunting trip, that I was going to check out some podcasts, maybe that had to do with construction. And the first thing that popped up was a person that had a real estate investing podcast. And I think I listened to that for the rest of the drive home, which was about 5 hours. And before I got home, I knew certain that life was about to change, and this was the route that I was going to go. It's my knowledge base. I knew how to build. I knew nothing about real estate investing, but I basically took myself to school, attended several real estate conferences, met some great people, including you, Alina, yourself, and meshed. I didn't know at the time that construction was going to really play much of a part. I actually thought it was, maybe I was weak in a lot of areas. And I used to tell people that at the real estate conferences. But it turns out that the construction aspect and my knowledge of it is probably one of the most powerful tools that we have at this point in what we're doing now.
That is absolutely amazing. I hope you saved that podcast that inspired you to get into real estate investing, because it sounds like it was inspirational for you. It probably can be inspirational for many other folks as well, which is definitely amazing. And Brian, I think you bring an important point. A lot of times we don't realize what kind of strength and weaknesses we have until we get to apply them to the real life. So when the push came to shove, and someone needed to take charge of the construction, that's where you came in, and you showed some strength in that field. And we're going to get into some of the strength of yours when we talk about your project. So let's dive into your first flex space project. Can you please share with us what kind of vision did you and your team have for it?
Yeah, so I'll tell you just a little bit about my team and where I'm at now. It's not just me, but with these real estate conferences, I just, by happenstance from being there at so many of them, met some partners that met some friends that we became partners, and we started out doing these weekly phone calls, and those carried on still to today. And that was 4 years ago or 5 years ago. We became partners. We bought some multifamily. The multifamily market has been so hot, with these low Fed interest rates, that it was just, too many dollars chasing too few deals. So we got to a point, we lost probably 99.9% of the deals we made offers on. And I had actually been somewhat forced to rent a unit, one of these flex space units, from a very good friend of mine up in the Iowa City area. And he didn't have these units in the fashion that he had them as an investment. He had them for his shop, but he just had a few extras that he would rent out, and they would pay for his shop. So he was just thinking about this from his own business, operating his own business. But as I'm renting a unit from him, I know what the company was paying rent to have me in there for. And I asked him, I said, how many other tenants you have here? And, he told me, and I asked him how much he bought the building for. And, he kind of told me all the numbers. And I said, you have a gold mine here. And it got my wheels turning to where I thought, you know what, we have a chance here to kind of start early and pivot with this hot market, and maybe let's go after a different asset and see, what that can do for us. So that being said, I kind of started playing around with some numbers, kind of on my own. I know a lot of builders and contractors in the area, and I knew I knew every aspect of what it takes to build pretty much any building. These buildings are way simpler than a home or something like that. So it was really easy for me. So I just started putting together, found a piece of land that I thought looked good. I reached out to some local engineering company and made a very good relationship with them. They kind of guided me and told me how the process works in a larger city. Because in my small town, it's, you really can kind of throw up a building without, having to go through too much. But we went through the process with the engineers. They came up with basically a site map that shows you, this is the plot of land you're looking at, and this is how many units you could fit on this in this orientation. You'll go back and forth with them until you figure out the best site utilization and how many units you can get on it. And it's based on your own desires, what you want to start with, but you usually do some market research. Once you have that kind of figured out, then I just went around and started getting bids from, rough bids from different contractors that I got through referrals in the area, and put together somewhat of a budget. And then I knew what we could get for rent on something new in a hot location. And once we got to the kind of final the numbers, I took these to my Prosper real estate partners, and to make sure, I needed them to check me because they're the numbers whizzes. I'm not. They do all that stuff. And when I showed it to my partners, it was a big time aha moment. We have to go this route, and this is what we're going to focus on for the foreseeable future. So I kind of did a pilot location on my own that just finished up in July. Took us about 9 months, 8 or 9 months. That's including a pretty rough winter, some below zero temps, which is pretty common, but people here in Iowa will work through, snow and the cold temps. So we got it done. And I think right now it's a 20 unit, and it went from, I think we had like 4 tenants when it was done. By the time we got the grass in and sprinklers going and had it really finished, we have 2 units left. So we're nearly 100% leased up. And actually, I think my partner in this one that I was talking about earlier, who had the business with the units that I rented from, he sold his units and I think is going to rent the last 2 that we have. So we'll be 100% leased up at that point.
Wow, that's absolutely insane. So 20 units, 18 rented right now. When is the construction completed?
We got our occupancy on July 1st, and we started moving dirt, I think it was around September 15th. So it was done a little bit before July 1st, but with the cities, you're going to go through some hoops, that they're going to come out and they're going to check and make sure your landscaping is the way it needs to be, because it's not just, you don't just get to build a new development and be done with it. They're going to tell you what kind of plants you're planting, how far apart they're going to be, and where they're going to be. So you have to have everything done per the site plans, which is basically your new development Bible. Your site plans is what you need to work off of. And if anything deviates from that site plan, it has to be approved by the city before you do something like that.
So, Brian, since you mentioned the city, let's talk a bit about working with the city, and tell us if you had any prior experience working with the city before this project.
I did not. The only city that I worked with was when my brother and I built this house that I'm in. It's a small city, and he's on the council, and I knew the guy that comes and checks your zoning and your measurements were friends. So they kind of come out and was like, you guys have been building homes around here for a long time, so we're going to trust you. In Iowa City, a much bigger city, I didn't know what I was getting into. So honestly, I just kind of took it one step at a time. Told them that I'm new to building in that area, and I don't understand yet what their processes are. So if I make a mistake, or maybe they see some ignorance there, know that it's not on purpose, and that I'm looking for any direction that maybe I could get along the way. So I think when you go about it that way, the city has been, I would say that they're notorious for being very hard on developers. I haven't had a problem with them, and they've been very helpful with me. And I think it's just about how you approach, your own development, and you're not trying to do things outside of the scope of work that you've planned. You're working with your inspectors, but there's a lot to it. There's a lot to the building permit process. A lot of them are online. You're working with maybe 15 different people within the city. Some are very young and some are out of college. So they might not even really know a whole lot. You get passed on to a lot of people, but you just got to be patient and try to, not deviate from their, from how they want the site to be done, their local policies and zoning and building codes, sorry.
So, Brian, while working with the city, and you mentioned that you worked with quite a few folks from the town, did you have situations where you were provided contradictory instructions and you were just lost and know which way to go?
Yeah, there has been, so with the development that we're on right now in Cedar Rapids, which is just another 20 miles north of Iowa City. That's a really good one to use. We have a street lamp that's in the middle of one of our driveways.
Mm-hmm.
And we've contacted the city administrator that takes care of all of the local street lighting. She is kind of the street lamp technician and the lighting technician for the city. Mm-hmm. When I contacted her and told her that we need to have a plan, we need to have a map. There's got to be a city map somewhere that shows the location of these street lamps. They said, "Can you check your engineering office?" Well, my civil engineers that I use, I knew they weren't going to have it, but I called them anyway and told them the situation. And they said, "Yeah, no, that's the city's going to have that, for sure." So I called the city back. This has been going on now for probably 5 weeks. Today, actually, about 3 hours ago, I made some very good traction on it, but nobody really knew who was supposed to be the one to come out and say, "Where do you want us to move this street lamp?" So the local electrical company, which is called REC, that's like a county electrical company. Mm-hmm. I work directly with them and they're very helpful. And they know that we can move this street lamp, but legally they have to have somebody from the city come out and put a stake in the ground and say, "This is where you can put this street lamp." That's the chain of command, how that works. And if you don't do that, even though you might have it in the right spot, if there's something wrong, they could come back on you. So compliance is a big issue. Sometimes it can be a little bit overbearing, but and it might even delay you. But you really do have to follow those zoning and those policy rules. But we finally today, I pulled in another guy that I talked to at the city who's always really helpful, and he's been there a while. You really want to talk to somebody who's been around a while because they'll kind of know, they've dealt with stuff before. Mm-hmm. And we finally have somebody that's coming out tomorrow to put the stake in the ground where that street lamp is supposed to go. So you will get misdirected, but as long as you just keep working with them and be patient and show them that you're trying to solve the problem correctly, they really like that and they want you to do it correctly. So if you show you care, they're going to help you as much as they can.
That is absolutely amazing. So you are really showing your traits of persistent and staying on top of things and working patiently with the city and letting them make that decision and not deciding for them, but you're helping them to drive it to the point where, yes, they'll put the stake in the ground and they'll let you know that this is where this lamp can be moved. So that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So you mentioned that the first project was in Iowa City. How did you guys, why did you select Iowa City, and how did you select the specific location in Iowa City?
Yep, great question. So most of your tenant base is going to be either construction, local trades, and things of that nature. Your car collector, I've got 2 of those. But it's mostly going to be like construction and local trades and smaller local businesses. So when I was back doing construction with my brother and building homes, we made a lot of trips to the gas station and a lot of trips to Menards. And there has been this piece of land as you're coming into Iowa City, right off the interstate. There is a road that goes, it's a frontage road, and it's got a cul-de-sac at the end. It's really nice. It's so visible. And I always thought, man, this would be the spot. So I called on it. And what made it even better is that it is sitting next to Menards, and it has a gas station across the street. So I thought, hey, these are the two essentials that a construction company or business owner is going to need. This is where we should try to go. The same family has owned it for a lot of years. It used to be farm ground back in the day. Menards was one of the first, what was their first, I think, actual sale. I could be wrong on that, but I think that one of the city administrators told me that. So I called on it, but the price per square foot was too high. After I'd ran my numbers, I knew kind of where we needed to be. $550 a square foot for land kind of seems to be that sweet spot. Anything above that, you really better be in an area that would support some higher rents, like maybe, you know, set $1,600 a month to $2,000 a month per unit. That's a $1,200 unit, dollar square foot, or 1,600 square foot unit at $1 a square foot. So we went back and forth for probably 2 or 3 months. That, you know, they turned me down quite a few times. So I finally came back to them because I knew we were going to build these things. I showed them that I had already went and got a site plan. So we invested some money into a site plan before we knew for sure that they were going to allow us to build it. And I should call it a site map. There's a difference. A site map is just basically one sheet of paper that your engineer can take their plot and show that you can fit, you know, these 20 units that I have on it. I took that to the broker and said, hey, we have this plan that we can execute on. And I know that I think they wanted $8 a square foot or a little more. And I come back and I said, would you ask the sellers if they would be willing to do this one spot at $550 a square foot? This land has been sitting vacant for a long time, but I think if we start building in here, it's going to recultivate a buzz in this area. And it was worth a shot. She came back and said, hey, surprisingly, they're actually willing to go for this. Amazing. They just want to make sure that you execute on the building. So we move forward, and that's kind of how we got the land price at the price that we did.
That's incredible. Again, Brian, your persistence paid off, where you stayed on top of things and willingly waited, you said, for 3 months for them to finally agree.
Yeah.
That's excellent. And for those folks that don't know, because we don't have Menards on the East Coast, Menards is like the local Home Depot or Lowe's. They're very popular in Midwest, but yeah, not here. I just know from my Iowa ownership days.
Oh yeah, the Yankee. That's right. I forgot you had a property here.
Yeah, very familiar with Menards. But anyway,
yeah.
So going back to your first project, the one I was stated, Brian, how is that vision shaping up? And you already told us that you're rented out 18 units out of 20, but walk us kind of through from where you started and where you're at today with that property, and what you had learned from it.
Yeah, so you know, obviously you get through the dirt work. You know, that was just over a year ago, and I knew I wanted to have a site. There are some other flex sites in the Iowa City area, but they're always kind of back off into some, you know, some back roads or side roads and buried, and they're very tight to get in and out of. So, and they're really crammed. You get a lot of auto body, transmission repair, and if you know anything about, you know, the auto world, they're going to have vehicles outside stacked up. There's going to be pallets. We wanted to have a site that was super clean, and we didn't just want the basic white or red building, you know, like a pole building or something like that. Excuse me. So we went with a little wider parking lot so that a full vehicle could get in there and turn around. They had plenty of room. And we knew that the appearance, the outside appearance, if we went with a higher end look, we knew that that would really turn some heads, especially since we're only about 150 yards from a major interstate and right on an exit ramp. So the colors that we chose, and I sent myself some pictures here. I'll see if I can get those pulled up. But we did more of a gray sidewall with a matte black wainscoting around the whole bottom, and then copper roofs. And it was a risk, to really grab the attention of people driving by, but it has proven to be, a good choice, because anytime somebody, comes by or, takes a look at it, they're like, man, that copper, or, this site I've never seen a site look this nice. So we wanted to, I guess, have more of a luxury looking site, and then be very selective with our tenants. And that meant from the start, as anybody knows, when you buy an asset, your bread and butter is your NOI. You got to make sure that the numbers pencil out. So you want to get tenants. We've probably, at the very beginning, when we only had a couple of tenants, we turned down, I'm going to say, at least a dozen tenants that either wanted to do auto body repair, auto transmission repair. That's where that came from. One was like a truck repair, trailer repair. We turned those down just because we knew that what would happen, no matter how clean they thought they were going to be. You can't change a transmission out in the day. And if you can't, and you're waiting on parts, they're going to shove it outside. It's going to leak all over the driveway. And so we've just been very selective with our tenants. And we usually tell our current tenants the same thing. And I've never had a tenant say that they don't appreciate that mindset and that management plan, if you will. So the site is exactly how we envisioned it. The only difference is at least up 10 months ahead of time.
That's really impressive. I like how you guys had the vision, not only for the site itself, but also for your future tenants in mind. But it also sounds, based on your experience, that particular area of Iowa City has a great demand for the other type of tenants, the ones that do trades that may have some sites that need cleanup afterwards, potentially. Are you thinking to cater to those type of tenants as well, potentially, and build something for them in the area?
I don't think so. We if you do that now, you've just increased, your level of maintenance. And the beauty, one of the beautiful things about these flex units is if you have the right tenants, they're very low maintenance. And they're durable units, and if there is something that's going to get beat up, it's just going to be a piece of steel or a few pieces of steel on the inside that can be changed out, within 10 to 15 minutes. So no, I'm sorry.
Even your dog is getting excited.
Yeah, I think the little one's at the door.
Yeah.
Yeah, the maintenance on them is very little. And if we do a site that catered to those kinds of tenants, it's gonna be a lot of work. So we want to continue this model, and that's kind of what our plans are for the future, is to continue doing more of the luxury style. I shouldn't call it luxury style, but just a higher end, cleaner look with better amenities.
Sure. So the other project that you mentioned that you're building in Grand Rapids, that's also going to be catered to similar type of tenants as well.
Yes, the one in Cedar Rapids is going to be a similar type of tenants. Yep, we have that one set up a little differently. It is also a 20 unit. Now I will say, with that one is with my Prosper, my primary company and partners. So that one is a 2-phase project, and this is where it kind of gets really interesting, what we're most excited about. But we wanted to have kind of more of like a mixed site portfolio. So we're going to have 20 of these units. They're larger, and the reason some of these are larger is because the phone calls that I've gotten over the past 8 to 12 months is, I have tenants calling me, potential tenants calling me and say, hey, how big are your units? Well, ours are 40 foot deep, the first 20 units that we just finished. And I've had a lot of people ask about 50 and 60 foot deep units. So
Wow.
I started collecting this data, and then knowing that that we were building this other site in Cedar Rapids, we used that data and we offered some, several units that are wider and then also deeper. And then in the second phase, we're going to do a full climate controlled self-storage building that I think has 280 units inside. And that was a feasibility study that supported that from Bob Copper.
And there is a high demand for the climate control storage units. Interesting.
Yes.
Would the storage units be only used as a storage, or do you anticipate they would be used as like shops as well, some of them?
The storage units are just going to be for your general traditional storage, students, people that are moving, locations. I mean, there's a lot of new employment in the Iowa City area. And with where we're at in Cedar Rapids, we chose this location also. It's right off of the interstate. I think it's super important to be easy access in and out. So if you can be right off of like an exit ramp and visible to the interstate, that's proven to be very important for us. And then we're also in a new area where there's, I think, like over 200 homes that are being built within, I think like a quarter of a mile behind us. So, one of the most important factors with full climate controlled or any self-storage is going to be that you're close to rooftops. So we were able to kind of check that box off. So they'll be used only for your traditional self-storage.
Got it. No Menards nearby?
Pardon?
No Menards near this one?
There's a Home Depot and a Menards up there, but we have a big brand new steel plant that just went in, and it's all right also down on what was a dead end, but they just put in a bridge there, so now it's going to increase traffic. But we're very close to, we're right on the edge of the south edge of Cedar Rapids, and there's a lot of businesses that work in between Cedar Rapids and Iowa City that do work in Cedar Rapids, but they need a shop there. They just don't want to have it in the middle of the city or on the other side of the city. So I think proximity is very important when you're getting into some of these, like especially in the Midwest. You got a lot of, mid-sized cities and smaller cities that are very close to each other within 15 miles, and they do a lot of work back and forth. So I think that if you can offer some convenient locations for them, you're not going to have a problem filling those up.
For sure. No, I love that. That's really awesome. And how long did it take you to find this second site?
The second one was probably, I think it was almost around the same time that I had broke ground on my 20 units that we finished up. So it would have been around, I think, like September of 22. No, it was actually earlier than that. I think it was July of 22, because we were planning on breaking ground a lot sooner than we did. It took a little while to close that deal, and then the elevation was a lot steeper than we thought, which is a lesson that people are going to want to watch out for. Another important factor is if you're going to find a place to build these types of units, you want to try to find a flat piece of land, as flat as possible. Otherwise, you're gonna pay for to level those up, with import and export of dirt.
Got it. So, Brian, we've got a question from the audience, but before you answer that, I think what also would be helpful if you have some pictures to pull up, that would be helpful. And while you're doing that, the question is, what is flex units? Is that commercial?
Flex units are commercial, yes.
Yeah, and I think if you show it, it'll be easier for folks to understand. But folks, flex units is more or less, think of it as a larger storage where the unit, because it's larger and could be any shape and any size, it could be also used by a trade shop. Right, Brian, do you want to give us a few examples of your tenants so people?
Yeah, definitely. So one tenant that rents 2 units from us. So that's another thing. You're going to get tenants that rent multiple units. So if you have a 20 unit, you might only have 11 tenants. So we have a bounce house company, which, by the way, happens to be a very lucrative company. And they're only there 2 days a week. But what I like about them is they bring in a lot of traffic because, everybody has, or a lot of people have kids and they have parties for them, and they come and pick these bounce houses up on Friday. So there's about 30 different customers that come in on a Friday to the buildings. And sure enough, they're telling people, about our location. So they're one of our tenants. We have a local tire dealer we have 2 local tire dealers that store tires out there. One of those tire dealers doubles as a lawnmower dealership, and they store their brand new inventory of lawnmowers. We have 2 construction companies that operate out of there, and they just keep tools, and they don't even keep a truck there, but it's just kind of their home base and their office where they meet in the morning before they leave. We have we have one auto detailer, so he just cleans cars, he's a younger guy. And we have a car collector, which those, in my opinion, those will be your best tenants because they're usually car collectors are very anal about their personal belongings, and they keep everything very clean, and they're quiet, and they're not there that often. So
Right.
The other one would be a landscaping company franchise that just moved. They took not our last 4, we got 2 left, but they took 4 units total, and we're building them an 800 square foot office starting tomorrow to accommodate for their needs. So that's just kind of a brief overview of some of the tenants that you could expect to have.
Yeah, if you have some pictures to show, I think that'll complete the picture of.
So I've got this new laptop that I was talking about earlier, and I sent a whole bunch to myself, and for some reason they didn't come through. So I don't know if that's something that I can add later or send anybody. I don't do this very often, but I don't
You don't
have
see
that.
them
No,
now.
but I do have a site plan if anybody wanted to see what a site plan looked like.
Sure, go ahead. Why don't you share? Let's spend a couple of minutes on the site plan. And this is for your first project, right? For the one that
Yes.
we talked about.
Yep.
Okay.
This would be the first project here. Let's see where it went here.
And while you, Brian, while you're pulling it up, the other question that came up is, when did you start building the flex space, and how many projects? So we talked about the first one, but how many projects do you have ongoing so far?
We have this one here is the one that we just finished up. We have the Cedar Rapids one with my primary partnership. And then we broke ground about 3 weeks ago on another 17 unit, which is directly behind. You can see my cursor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's going in down here. So there was a little bit of land left over in between here and Menards, and we bought the rest of that land. They also turned me down, I think, 2 or 3 times for the 550 a square foot, but I said, hey, we kept our promise on this. And since then, there is a national retailer going in across the street, and a gym going in down at the end. So I said, hey, you got us to blame for that. Can we just have this one last little spot, and then we won't ask for that again? And so they let us have one more piece at that 550 a square foot. So we'll be doing.
That will be behind Menards, right? Menards is in between your first project and the third.
Yes. So we have this 20 unit. And then we'll have 17 here, and Menards is right here. So it's all in line with this road right here.
Awesome. And this is a busy road, right?
It's a cul-de-sac at the end of it, but it is absolutely crazy busy. It always has been from the start.
Got it. Excellent.
But this is an example of a site plan. You're going to have a few different pages here. I don't know if it's really hard to see or not. Like I said, I'm not a tech savvy guy, and I don't do these that often. So.
Yeah, no, it's clear to see the site plan. I don't know how many people know how to read the site plans, and we're not going to spend much time on it. But the next question that we have from the audience: for the office built out, do you charge the tenant the office?
Yeah, great question. We just kind of finalized that yesterday, and I collected the check from a tenant today that we built an office for. So we did a 200 square foot office, and we're doing an 800 square foot office tomorrow. Like I said, what we discussed with my primary partnership is that's where the brains are all at. So I usually ask them, hey, how should we do this? What we do is we get a price for us to build that office, and I have a builder, like I said, in one of my units that's across the driveway. I asked him, I said, hey, would you be interested in doing this? He said, absolutely. So he gives me a pretty good price on labor to build the units. And I go to Menards and get my materials list. And I put that together and I send it to the tenant and say, this is what it would cost for us to meet your needs. We don't mark it up. We give them the total cost. They have to pay for the total cost up front. And then we will amortize 50% of that cost back to them over the term of their lease. The reason that we do this is because if you were to, and we had it happen already actually with our very first tenant that signed a lease. If you were to build that office, so this office, for instance, 800 square foot one is around 25,500, to give you some real numbers here, since they're fresh in my head. If you were to pay for that up front, and they broke their lease after 8 months or a year, you're not getting that money back. And even if they did pay their lease out, or you had to go through all that hassle to evict somebody or take them to court, you're still building an 800 square foot office that maybe isn't that desirable in anybody else. So we decided that if they paid for that cost up front, we'll amortize back that 50% over however long they want their lease to be. And in this case, it's a 3-year lease. So now they're incentivized to stay through that lease because they're going to want half their office money back. And that's how we set that up. And so far, with both tenants, they've been completely okay with it.
Excellent. No, that's good to hear. And Brian, since you can't find your own flex space, I just kind of wanted to share a picture with everyone of what a potential flex space may look like. So guys, these are some of the examples of flex spaces, and as Brian was sharing, they could be used simply like raw, like this raw room. You can build out like a garage for your car or whatever, or you can build an office out of it, and people use it for different purposes, and some may be bigger, some may be smaller. They don't have to be all the same size. I don't know, Brian, in your case, are they all the same size?
The first 20 unit one that we did, they're all 30 by 40, so they're 1,200 square foot, and we charge $1 a square foot. The next one, just next door, we have some that are going to be 33 by 60. We have some that are going to be 30 by 50. I think 8 of them are 30 by 50. And then because of the shape of the land, we had to narrow some up, but we wanted to utilize it. So I think, in my opinion, in my experience, I think that the minimum that you should be is probably 30 by 50, I think is kind of the sweet spot, is what people are going to want. And the reason why, anywhere from 50 to 60 foot, you're going to have people ask if they can store their motorhome or a camper in there. And if you're 30 foot or 40 foot deep, some of those goosenecks or a construction guy with a truck and a trailer that wants to leave it hooked up, maybe they got back at 7 or 8 o'clock at night and they don't want to, unhook or park on the street. They want to be able to back their whole entire truck and trailer in there. So I think 30 by 50 is the sweet spot, but I think that you should offer 30 by 60 at least.
Excellent. So we have another question from the audience. Eric is asking, when you say amortize 50%, you give them back the cost of the building, their office?
Yes, we only half of the office. So we give them back, we have a $25,000 office. We'll give them back $12,500 amortized over the term of their lease.
Eric, I hope that answers your question. If not, feel free to. Okay, there's a follow-up from Eric. How do you charge utilities? Water, electric, gas? Great question.
Yeah, so we chose to do a modified gross lease, so it's not a triple net. So they have their base rent, And then I had everything metered separately to take, even more maintenance and more administrative work off myself. So all the gas, electric, and water is all metered separately, and that's their responsibility.
You guys do pay the taxes, insurance, that's all on you and the CAM?
We pay our own taxes, we pay our own insurance, but the tenant is required to carry $1 million liability and their own renter's insurance, which is generally pretty cheap for them, and most of them want it anyway. We've never had anybody not want to do it.
You said you chose to do modified gross, and even with that, you are allowed to include taxes and insurance because it's modified gross. I mean, you can modify it any way you want to, but was that based on what you saw locally in the area, other landlords are charging, or was there another reason why you decided not to charge them for taxes? Because taxes do grow every year, same with insurance.
Yeah, taxes is a large part of it. I found out ahead of time that we have like a 7-year tax abatement. So we're not going to have any taxes. And after the 7 years, it steps down, I think, over to 10 years. So we're getting quite a big break on taxes. If you're doing new developments somewhere anyway, you can ask the city if they have any of those tax incentives, or if they'll give you some. Some will, especially if you're kind of in more of a tertiary market. If you're willing to come in there and build, a $2 or $3 million site that you're going to contribute a lot of taxes in the future to, I would say that there's probably a vast majority of municipalities or cities that are going to want to offer some type of a tax break.
Got it. So, Brian, as we near in the end, couple of questions to kind of complete the conversation about your very first flex space project. What are some of the lessons learned from this project, and what are the things that you would want to avoid moving forward based on that first project?
Yeah, great questions. From a site perspective, if a person is out scouting for sites, you want to make sure that the land is fairly level. It doesn't need to be perfectly level, but you want it to be fairly level. If you have a piece of land and it's a big hole, or it drops 30 foot over the course of 200 foot, you're going to have a whole lot of imported soil, clay, that you have to bring in, class 5 clay that you got to bring in. And that was a hang up on Cedar Rapids that we didn't have in our budget. Was we were a little bit off on what our budget was going to be. However, I was able to kind of save my hind end here because I know so many people in the area, and I know a guy that works for a very large earth moving company, and he was familiar with that site in that area. I was telling him what our problem was, and he said, can you dig? Ask them if you can dig for your class 5 soil, your class 5 clay, out of the detention basin, because every location is going to have its own basin that the storm water is going to leach into. But if you dig deep enough, there is the type of soil that you need. So instead of having to pay a trucking company to truck in the type of clay that we needed, which was, I think, 13,000 cubic yards, it saved us, I can't even remember. I want to say $70,000, but don't quote me on that. So you want to make sure that your site is fairly level. It will help you when it comes down to getting the site prepped and getting your dirt work completed. So that's one of them. The other one is your civil engineers. They're the ones that come up with everything. You don't have to know how to do it. You can rely on engineers. You can rely on builders to kind of tell you, how things are going to work. So even a person that doesn't have a ton of experience, the first person that you're going to talk to is whoever owns the land. After that, it's going to be some local civil engineering company, and they're going to be the ones that you lean on and kind of tell you. You can ask them, what's the process? Because they're doing this for other developers, and they can kind of tell you what's next. And that's exactly how I kind of started out. I said, what do I do after this? Tell me all the things that I need to kind of look into. So one of the mistakes that I had made after having my engineers get my site elevations off the site plan ready to go, that there's one page of the site plan that'll tell you the exact footage of the level of everything. And to save money, I knew that, okay, if I just keep my site at basically zero, instead of taking more out than they tell me, I know I won't have to add a whole lot of rock to go under the concrete, and I'll save a bunch of money. It didn't work out that way. So if you do that, you're going to have the utility company come in and start putting in all your infrastructure. And when they do that, they dig a bunch of trenches, which leaves a lot of spoils, which is your leftover clay. And then you're going to get frost and rain and snow, and it's going to heave and it's just going to raise up. So during the winter months, we spent a lot of hours in skid loaders hauling out muck and mud because there was too much dirt in there. It was too high. So what I learned to do from the advice of another, like a dozer operator, the guy that does dirt work, is leave your site, whatever your engineer has your site set at for your buildings to sit on, your finished grade is what they call it. Bring it down 10 inches. Have them take an extra 10 inches out. That way, by the time everybody gets done doing their infrastructure work, they're going to build onto it a little bit. But then after that, you're going to haul a little bit of rock in for your subgrade, but it's not going to amount to nearly the price or the headache as what it would cost you to keep scooping mud out. And it really caused a lot of headaches. So that was a huge lesson. So the Cedar Rapids site and then the 17 unit that we just broke ground on, those are both 10 inches down lower than what they need to be to account for that slope.
Excellent. So you are improving every time you're starting a new project. Great. And you already know that you chose a great site the first time around because you're expanding it. So there is a demand. Yulia, I saw you raised your hand. I clicked on allowing you to talk. So you should be able to talk. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Sorry, it was accidental. I didn't know how I did it. Sorry, I didn't mean.
No problem. If you have a question, feel free to ask. Okay. I guess no questions from Yulia. Excellent. So Brian, we have about 2-3 minutes left. I'll let folks sit on it and see if they have any more questions. If anyone wants to reach out to you, what is the best way to connect with you, Brian?
If someone wants to reach out to me directly, they can email me at my Prosper. It's B Shafer, and I can actually. You want me to? Should I type it down here in the?
Sure.
Notes?
Yeah.
Okay. They can reach me at my primary email, which is bshafer@prosper-rei.
Are you putting it in the chat? Perfect.
Yes, I did. I am on LinkedIn. I'm trying to use that a little bit more. I do get the notifications, but really, if you look me up on Facebook, I get a lot of messages on Facebook, and then, pretty active on that. So if somebody wanted to Facebook, I can put our company website, which is prosper-rei.com.
Excellent. But some of the best ways to connect with you is really to either email you directly or find you on Facebook.
Yep, email me directly, find me on Facebook. I also don't have a problem putting in my phone number just because I get a lot of text messages. And if you want to get a hold of me quick, or something, or want to schedule a phone call, text is that's my go-to. That's my primary way to get a hold of me. So I don't mind that. I've had to have a lot of help, so I enjoy helping other people, wherever I can.
Excellent. Brian, well, this has been an amazing presentation. I certainly learned a lot about flex space development, and I'm sure our audience as well. This will be recorded, shared with our audience, and then placed on YouTube for others to view. So I'm sure it's going to hit a lot of views, and you'll probably get a lot more folks reach out to you in the near future. But thank you so much. Great presentation. We thank you for your time and for sharing your expertise. And we hope to bring you back to hear about more of your projects in the future. Yeah, definitely. It was my pleasure to be here, and I appreciate you having me. One thing, I just seen something pop up here from an email that I think I should leave you all with.
There are different types of these flex buildings, different structures, construction, post and frame, and then you're going to have your traditional stick build, like framing construction on slab, and then you're going to have steel buildings. We do all post and frame right now because they're very economic when it comes to price. They're easy to build. Some people might tell you that they don't like post and frame because they're worried about boards rotting out. Every barn here in Iowa is post and frame, and they're all still standing for over 100 years. So we're completely okay with that. But I will say that in order to get institutional interest, I've heard that they may look at, steel buildings and things of that nature. So we might try to switch it up once material prices come down, but right now this is the model that we're going to stick with. But I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of the different types of construction. I'm more than happy to elaborate if people reach out to me.
So post and frame is easy to build and more economical.
Easy to build, more economical, yes. So it's a lot cheaper to build. Still a great structure. You could put it up against any regular stick built structure. It's just a different style.
Got it. Excellent. Thank you again for sharing, Brian. Thanks everyone for watching this and for your great questions tonight. Have a great night, and we'll see you guys later. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye.